Canada's minister responsible for Canada-US trade says conversations with American officials over steep tariffs remain constructive, but a resolution is still out of reach. Appearing on Face the Nation on Sunday, Dominic LeBlanc said that Ottawa is hoping for progress in discussions on the 50% tariff the U.S. has placed on Canadian aluminum, a move he says is backfiring on both economies. LeBlanc said that the tariffs are driving up costs in deeply integrated sectors like auto manufacturing. Canada's ambassador to the U.S., Kirsten Hillman, spoke on Canada's progress with the Trump administration on reaching a trade deal.
Had fairly constant discussions for the last, I'd say, 3 weeks, and this week was a very positive week. We got some very concrete discussions that helped us better understand each other, and for Canada, help us better understand what a path might look like to an agreement that works for Canada, works for Canadians, works for Canadian businesses, workers. The U.S. side was actually quite satisfied with a lot of what we were discussing. And I think that also on their side, my impression is that they found it to be a constructive week that led us to make some important progress. And I think that the consequence of that is that we are going to continue our discussions over the coming weeks and hopefully get to the right place for a deal for us. We're just not there yet. We made progress, and we're just not there yet.
For more on this, political strategist John Buchan joins us. John, thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, let's start with the basics. Why do you think that the U.S. imposed a 50% tariff on Canadian aluminum in the first place?
Well, part of the problem is the reciprocal tariffs we put on at the start, and they don't help anybody, because what ends up happening is when we're importing items, we have to pay more, and then it's added more to the actual tariff that the Americans have placed, because their position is if we're going to be reciprocal, then they have to increase their tariffs again. That way they're offsetting that. So I think that was a bad move from the start. I think that the elbows up approach has actually backfired, because cooperation would have been a lot better. When Carney was first elected, he came out and said that he was a man that believed in plans and not slogans. Since then, we've been hit with nothing but slogans: Canada strong, elbows up. And to be honest, it's been detrimental. And I think that was one of the biggest missteps that they've made. And it's leading to inflation. Today that Carney was out in British Columbia, and he indicated that he had a small package ready to go for the lumber industry, which is important to protect the jobs. But at the end of the day, printing more money is going to lead to more inflation. So at the end of the day, the Canadian consumer is the person who's going to be hit, and the taxpayer is the one who's hurt.
Well, Dominic LeBlanc called the current talks constructive, but also admitted a resolution is still far off. What do you make of that language?
Political posturing, basically keeping the domestic the vote, happy, trying to make it look like things are working when actually, in fact, they've stalled. I'm really disappointed with how they've handled it. I think that they've had opportunities. I know LeBlanc was down in America a little while ago, and he wasn't able to meet with anybody. There's always going to be political posturing, but so far, I think this has been totally boggled. And I understand that there's only 10% of the items that are outside of USMCA that are being affected, but they never ran on that platform. Like, they basically indicated when they were running that this is the greatest threat in generations. And now all of a sudden they're backpedaling and saying, well, it's not that bad. It's only 10%. Where was that when they were being elected? Like, when they were being elected, basically the whole thing was, you need to elect us for tariffs. We're going to be the ones to get you through this. And so far it's been stagnant. There's been nothing going on.
Well, you've said that you're disappointed with how it was handled. How do you think that the government should have approached this?
Not reciprocal tariffs. We were one of the only countries, along with China, to put reciprocal tariffs on, because other countries realized if you're going to put tariffs on your imports, you're going to pay more for them, and they're just going to raise them on their end. So that was, I think, a really bad move at the start. And again, with the fentanyl, a lot of what they're pointing to, I do understand that not as much goes over the border from Canada to Mexico. But ultimately, we do have a fentanyl problem here in Canada that we should be addressing anyways. So we should be tougher on fentanyl across the board.
Well, LeBlanc also said that these tariffs are hurting both economies, especially in sectors like auto manufacturing. What specific impacts are we seeing so far?
It's cost us already $1.5 billion to the Canadian economy. Tariffs are all right because the government can increase their revenue. So I understand Trump's position. He doesn't want to raise taxes on his citizens. He wants to raise taxes on other countries, basically bringing items in. But ultimately, the consumer pays on both sides of the border. They are in a better position than us, though. They have a 2% better employment. Like their employment rate is 2%, or unemployment rate is 2% less than ours. And their economy is growing a little bit. So they can actually withstand a lot of this, where we're in a rough situation because the same government that's now trying to solve everything had 10 years to do so and has put us in a really bad situation. For 10 years, they could have been growing the economy and looking for other partners. And now all of a sudden, that's their plan. Like it's just Dominic LeBlanc, these guys have been here for a decade and they've done nothing but put us into the ground. And now we're basically in a really rough position.
Well, John, thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you for having me.